Hello friends, welcome back to Paul's Little Forge. We're going to get right to it today. We are going to make a copper Damascus knife. You will also hear this called a Cumai, C-U-M-A-I. So let's don't waste any time. Let's get started on it. This is the template of what we're going to try to make. For the handle, we are going to use this desert ironwood. That's kind of quite beautiful there. We're going to bolt that on with some Goso bolts, and this is going to be our steel part. We're going to have a center core of some high carbon steel. Might be a little bit of surprise on that at the end. Right next to that high carbon centerpiece, we're also going to have some 15N20, which is also a high carbon steel, and that will sit like that. And then all of these little shims right here that are just a pain in the butt to deal with, there is copper and nickel in there. And we're going to clad the outside with some 1095. So what I'm going to do is get these cleaned up with some acetone, make sure there's no rust spots or anything like that on them. I'm going to stack them together, weld the corners, and maybe even weld a beam across the center there once I get them all together, something like that. It's a little, like I said, these shims are kind of hard to deal with, but once I get them all squared away, I'll weld a little beam across them. And I am not going to do this in my forge. I am going to use my heat treat oven on this because copper will melt at about 1900 or above. I don't want to reach that 1900, so I'm scared of using my forge because I may get it turned up too high. And even though I can put a thermocoupler in there and tell the temperature, it may be 1800 on one side of the forge and it might be 22 on the other. So I'm not going to take that chance. I will use my heat treat oven and I will set it at 1850, and that's what we're going to do. Let's move forward, guys. Okay, it's reached 1850. You'll notice it's saying 1837 right now. It cycles up to about 1865, 1870, and then drops down to, 1830 or so, but it stays right around that 1850 range. Let's take a peek inside and see what it looks like. Oh my goodness! Okay, we got this billet flattened out. It's about 10 inches long. It's about 1/4 of an inch thick. We got a pretty good bond, it looks like. Don't know if you can see that, but that is some of the copper and nickel that you see shining right there, because I ground a corner off of it just to make sure we did have a good seal. I'm gonna make a slight change. This was originally the template I was going to use to make the knife, and it still basically is. I just added a little bit of a higher point on this. You can see it right there. So it's not much difference, but just enough to make it sexy. So my next step is, and I won't film this because it just doesn't make sense. I'm gonna sandblast it, knock some of the heavy scale off of it. Then I will put this template on there, spray paint around it, grind and cut off all the excess. Then we will take it and put it on the surface grinder, get this down to good usable steel, and get all this outside stuff off of there. So that's what we're going to start on now. So we'll grind off everything that is blue.
We still have to heat treat this, so we're not trying to get it to a mirror finish or anything.
I'm liking it, guys. And there's my little tip that I put on there just to make that, like I said, a little more sexier, and I think it did. Let's talk about a couple of things real quick. Got a pretty good finish on here. I like to get it a little bit smooth because I do put a coating on here to help with carbide building up after the quench. And then I get asked sometimes why I don't hammer my Damascus into shape. Sometimes I do when I'm doing random Damascus. We just layer it, hammer it as close in shape as I can, then I'll take it to the grinder and do the rest of the way. When I'm trying to do a pattern like I am with this copper Damascus, if I try to hammer it into place, that pattern's not going to look right. So I got to control that look. Since this has a lot of 1095 in it, I'm going to heat treat it just like it's 1095, mostly because you can only heat treat one way, and that's the majority of steel I have in this. So I'm going to use that heat treat recipe. 1095, there's all kinds of people out there that have their own recipe. I do what Dr. Laren Thomas says to do from Knife Steel Nerds, if you want to look up what he says, but that's what I follow. 1095 also, guys, it's not a beginner steel. I get that mistake from people a lot of times, that 1095 is for beginners, and that is completely wrong. There's a lot to learn about 1095. If you're going to use a steel that starting out as a beginner, I would recommend 1084. That would be a good steel to start with. So I'm going to drill some holes in the handle, and then we're going to get it heat treated. All right, now we're done with the quench and the heat treat. I did take it to the surface grinder and just kind of give it a little clean in there, just very lightly. So next what I'm going to do is draw my lines on here for how high up I want the bevel to come. I'm going to put a center line in here to make the bevel go from wherever it stops here to the center line on both sides, so it'll be symmetrical. Also, I'm going to put a center line back here, because on this, I'm going to grind a little swedge in that. Again, just trying to make this thing look a little bit sexy. That also might even show the Damascus. Forgot I had to do the back piece there for a second, so I can do that now. So we did a little bit of hand sanding on this. We got the swedge up here looking kind of good, but we're not near where we need to be. This is only up to about 120. I haven't gone any higher than that, but we're going to take this all the way up to 1,000 grit. First, though, we are going to put our book matched scales on this. And one thing that's really important, guys, the side that's going to the knife towards the handle, make sure you get that, sand it down really smooth with no gaps, because it looks pretty poor when you put it on and there's a little gap in here between the knife and the wood handle. So I always make sure I get these surface off really smooth and flat first. Got some tape in between these two here, and then we'll put some tape on top. We'll stick this baby on there, and we'll drill some holes. I got this hand sanded to 1000 grit. I only filmed hand sanding one side. I'm not really sure you guys want to sit through watching both sides done. If you do, put me a message in there and I'll keep it in. But I've just been doing one side. Looks pretty good. You can see a little bit of the pattern in there already. And we're gonna etch this in some ferric acid. See how that looks, and we'll check back on it in about 5 minutes or so. Let's check it out. All right, so I'm actually not very happy with this knife. You can see that right in here, I put some Damascus. That center piece of high carbon was a little bit of leftover Damascus. But you can see where I put the copper and it doesn't show up very well. So this does have copper in it, but it is not very visible to the eye. And the reason for that is I used too thin a copper shim. So I've learned a lesson today, but this is still a pretty nice knife, and we'll go ahead and put it up for sale. But when I do the next copper Damascus, I'm not gonna go so thin on the shims. Well, we tried an experiment and it turned out okay, but not great. Thank you guys. I really enjoy you. I appreciate all my followers. Thank you so much. See you next time.